I want to read with you from Exodus chapter 18. I'm really excited that Brandon is going to be speaking today. We've had fun talking about this passage. And I told him, I said, are you sure you want me to read the whole chapter? Because you might not have much time to preach. Exodus 18. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all the good things God had done for Moses and for the Israel, his people, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her home, along with her 2 sons. The name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I've been a sojourner in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife and the wife of Moses in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her, Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, and in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, What is this that you are doing for the people? Why are you sitting alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God, and when they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide one person and another, and I make known to them the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you're doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, and I'll give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make known the ways in which they must walk and what they must do. But moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and of 10s. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all the people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and of 10s. And they judged the people at all times. Any hard cases they brought to Moses, but any small matters they decided themselves. And then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. Amen.
for those who haven't been with us, we have been exploring the book of Exodus, and we have finally, after many months, arrived at Exodus chapter 18. And if you notice from the reading, we are reintroduced into a character named Jethro in verse 1. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, ... Who is Jethro? Jethro's our first encounter with Jethro is in Exodus chapter 2. And that's when Moses flees to Midian after murdering an Egyptian who was beating up one of his people. And upon their encounter, we learn three things about Jethro. The first is that he is the priest of Midian. The second is that he had 7 daughters. And the third is that he goes by another name, Ruel. That means friend of God. And the author doesn't really tell us why he keeps going back and forth with those names, but yeah, in any case, I think that the author is telling us that Jethro is a man of status, he's a man of authority in his Midianite community, and he's really important. In Jethro's first appearance in Exodus chapter 2, the author juxtaposes him or contrasts him with Pharaoh, the cruel and oppressive tyrant. If you see Exodus 2:15, it tells us that Pharaoh sought to kill Moses, which forced him away from his home. But in the verses immediately following, we see that Jethro lovingly invites Moses into his own home, giving him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. When we encounter Jethro again, about 15 chapters later here in chapter 18, we are in fact justified in expecting another juxtaposition, and indeed, we find one. Jethro is contrasted against the warring and bloodthirsty Amalekites of the previous chapter. Now you might be wondering why is it important that we talk about these juxtapositions? I think the author is trying to tell us one important thing, namely that Jethro is not like Pharaoh. Jethro is not like the Amalekites. And that forces us to ask the question, of course, then, what is he like? What is Jethro like? And what is Jethro going to be up to this time? Today I want to show that Jethro offers Moses 3 gifts. And I think we'll see that Jethro and Moses' encounter is actually not just about leadership advice, which in fact it is, but importantly, it's also pointing to how God meets us in Jesus. Okay, so let's start with the first gift. We see in Exodus chapter 18 that Jethro comes to Moses with Moses' wife and his 2 kids. So that's Zipporah the wife, and Gershom and Eliezer. And that's the first gift that Jethro brings to Moses. Moses gets to see his family again. And at some point, though the reasons were hidden from us, verse 2 tells us that Moses sent his family back to live with Jethro. So it must have been pretty refreshing for Moses to see his family after being on this journey for such a long time. Apparently, some commentaries say it's been a few months. And like I said, my brother has been away for like 2 weeks, and I'm already missing him very deeply. So I can see how Moses must have been very refreshed by seeing his family. But just as important as this relational comfort is, we see that Moses' family also represents his identity and his salvation. And this seems to be a theme that we continue to see in the book of Exodus. Zipporah is a gift of grace from Jethro, a life companion, and an embodied reminder that Moses had been taken into Jethro's family. Gershom, whose name means sojourner in a foreign land, reminds Moses of the significant season of his life when he was a sojourner. And in fact, it was as a sojourner that Moses first encountered God in the burning bush. And finally, of course, Eliezer reminds Moses that the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So Jethro brings Moses the gift of family, and along with that comes the encouragement and reminder of who he is and what God has done. Guys, it's really important to know who you are. In his classic work, The Consolation of Philosophy, Boethius tells the story of his encounter with Lady Philosophy. And sitting on his bedside, wiping away the tears of his unjust imprisonment, Lady Philosophy calmly and pointedly diagnoses Boethius' true issue. You have forgotten who you are, she says. You have forgotten who you are. Last Friday, I was playing some board games with some CCF friends. There's this game called Avalon. Have you guys heard of the game Avalon? I see some hands, some of the younger people. Avalon is a fun game. It was my first time playing. But interestingly, about this game, everyone receives a card, right, a character. And then each character has a special ability or something, right? So you have to know what your character is, and if you don't, then you don't really know how to play the game, right? So you get a card, and you also have to conceal your identity from other people, so other people don't know who you are, right? So we were playing this game, and then it was the turn of someone, I won't say who, it was a friend, and they were they forgot who they were, and then they exclaimed I don't know who I am. I've forgotten who I am, right? And because they forgot who they weren't able to play the game, right? And then we had to start again. We had to restart the whole game. Guys, it's important to know who you are, because if you don't know who you are, then you don't know how to live. We all need reminders, and even Moses did, because in the messiness of life patterned after the oppression of Pharaoh or the violence of the Amalekites, our identity will command our response. Moses was a sojourner in a foreign land. He was rescued from the sword of Pharaoh. He was a son-in-law of a very important person, Jethro, priest of Midian, friend of God. And most importantly, Moses was loved by God. Jethro's first gift to Moses was a reminder of his identity, and that is fundamental to Moses' journey with God in the wilderness. Okay, let's move on. Second gift. I want to explore the nature of the encounter between Moses and Jethro. So let's read verse 6 to 12. And when Jethro, sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. As I was studying and reading this passage, I couldn't help but think about my own longing for this kind of friendship and mentor. In my first year of undergrad, when my faith began to more seriously took shape, I met the faith leader at CCF at UTM. His name was Raf. This is the best picture I have of the both of us. It's a bit blurry though, unfortunately. But this was during my first retreat with this fellowship. That was in 2019, and it was a really, really good time. Raf was an older gentleman with an unassuming character who kind of walked around. He had a limp, but he was always full of joy, and he was always full of God's Spirit. Our conversations were marked by mutual sharing, reciprocated joy, but the most important thing about Raf was that all his conversations were about God and the ministry on the campus. I remember he would often message me, hey, Brandon, want to chat? And then he would put a smiley face emoji, and I would know instantly that Raf wanted to talk about God, that he wants to talk about CCF, that he wants to talk about campus ministry, or just something he was reading in Scripture. Raf loved prayer. He loved the presence of God. He loved worship. And in fact, some of my favorite moments spent with him were in prayer for our campus to see renewal. Last year on December 1st, he passed away. But Raf was an incredible gift to me, a mentor who arrived in my life at the perfect time to give me and so many others what we needed to grow into the people God called us to be. But beyond the things already mentioned, Raf helped me develop a richer theology of the Holy Spirit. He helped me cultivate a more vibrant prayer life. He gave me some very special book recommendations. And most of all, he just loved me and he trusted in me. I remember, I think it was a year ago now, I was leading CCF. It was my last year of undergrad. And there was a busy task at hand. We had to plan a retreat. It was like a 3-day, 2-night thing. We only had a month left, but I was just feeling a word from God that we had to have this because we were coming out of COVID and we were trying to really rebuild the community and grow in our faith together. And yeah, I called him sometime before then because I was wrestling with whether this was a thing and whether I could do it. I remember him like speaking into my life saying, "Brandon, you were made for this moment. Just go out there and shine. Just go out there and shine." If you've had anyone say that to you, it is something. And that was enough for me to go out there with my team. We planned the whole retreat, and it was a really, really glorious retreat. New relationships were built, new leaders were raised up. I somehow managed to preach 3 sermons in one weekend. Hashtag no compromise. Raph enabled me, and he trusted in me, he trusted in us, and that's the gift that Raph was to me. And when I read this passage in Exodus 18, I think that the relationship between Jethro and Moses was a lot like that. Jethro was an encouragement, a source of wisdom, a source of love, and most of all, just simply a friend. And Moses liked being around Jethro. He was excited to meet him. He ran out to see him, right? And bowed and kissed him and everything. It was a relationship in which he felt safe to share and talk about the most important things on his heart. Do you have a Jethro in your life? This year, we started the Compass Mentorship. Thank you to Clint. That was an incredible gift to us as a church. And I encourage you, mentors, continue to invest in your mentees because there's a lot of young people like me who really need that push and encouragement to become the people that God's called us to be. And if you aren't a mentor yet and you're interested in becoming a mentor, or you're a mentee, or you're not a mentee yet and you would like to be mentored, then definitely reach out to Darcy. I think Darcy's doing it. Darcy and Vicky, and they'll connect you with the program. We're starting again in the fall. So we're gonna next fall, we're gonna have a bunch of Jethros and Moses running around this church because we're gonna be inspiring each other and pushing each other in our faith. But let's all be a part of that, right? All of us have been given gifts by God to pour into other people. So let's use that for God's glory. Okay, the last gift. So Jethro had given the timely gifts of his identity through the family and his friendship, which represented Jethro's love for Moses. But before Jethro's departure, he had one more gift to give to Moses. So let's read verse 13. Okay. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and the other. I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they'll bring to you, but any small matter they'll decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people will go to their place in peace. So first, I want us to notice that this encounter between Jethro and Moses is happening in the wilderness. Verse 15 says that in the wilderness they met in the wilderness where he encamped at the mountain of God. In the biblical imagination, the wilderness kind of represents the place of testing and character formation. Remember Jesus, he went into the wilderness and he was tempted by the devil but resisted as he resolved in his identity that he was the Son of God. So the wilderness is the place where we die to our compulsive, egotistic selves. And for Moses, I think there is an ego death that needs to take place here. And this rebuke from Jethro is in fact the final gift he has to Moses. I guess it's not a nice gift, but it's good for him in the future. So the scene is this. People are standing around Moses, waiting for his opinion, judgments concerning the situations in their lives and problems from morning till evening. And I don't think we have to read farther than verse 13 to know that sounds problematic. I read in some scholarship, apparently there was at least 30,000, if not 2 million Israelites. So imagine that many people surrounding one guy, Moses. Like Moses was a legend, we have to acknowledge that. But 2 million people is a lot for one person. So there was clearly a problem, and Jethro saw that. Jethro points out the problem. Hey Moses, you got a lot of people. You got to delegate able men. They're able to deal with their smaller issues, so you can just deal with the larger ones. And this way, you, Moses, can share the burden with the other people. We see that Moses, in fact, obeys Jethro and applies what he learns. But I think I would like to consider, maybe even speculate, that there is something deeper happening here in Moses' heart. When Jethro asks, "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" Moses, I think, maybe almost proudly responds that the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another. I make known to them the statutes of God and his laws. I have a question for you. Are you familiar with the pleasure of self-importance, of being uniquely useful, that people come to you to ask questions about life's deepest problems, or people come to you for comfort, not others? I must confess, this is something that I have struggled with and continue to struggle with. And so Jethro, he rebukes Moses, knowing that this is an issue. What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You can't do this alone, Moses. And what precisely is the thing that is too heavy? I think, if we can be open to it, I think that the thing that is too heavy is that perhaps Moses is drawing his significance from what he does instead of who he is. Moses is drawing his significance from what he does instead of who he is. Lost and helpless Israelites are coming to him for advice and knowledge about God, not Aaron, not Hur, not Joshua. He is a celebrity of usefulness to the people, and that is what is doing profound damage to his soul. And Jethro is aware of this. And to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with people coming to him. I don't think there's anything wrong with people coming to you. But I think that just means that you have a special anointing on your life. Perhaps God is calling you to leadership and to help those people. But I think we should be open to the possibility that maybe Moses was drawing his significance from what he does instead of who he is. You, Moses, have forgotten who you are. This bears a kind of literary irony, all things considered. Because for one, if we remember the first gift, Moses had just been reminded of who he is. His family and their names point to the reality of God's powerful hand in his life, how he saved Moses for a higher calling. And secondly, he was, as it were, adopted into the family of Jethro. He is Jethro's beloved son-in-law. And Jethro, remember, is not a nobody. He's an important man. He has 7 daughters. He's the priest of Midian. He is the friend of God. He is the literal juxtaposition of Pharaoh and the Amalekites. Yet in this short but relatable moment of blindness, we see that Moses feels as though he must prove his worth. And this is the great danger of spiritual work and leadership. I think this forces us to reflect on an important question, which is this: where do I get my sense of significance from? Where do I get my sense of significance from? Is it from what I do? I lead a small group. I pray. I own a flourishing business. I get good grades in school. I serve my church. I'm a great help to others. People come to me. Or is my sense of significance from who I am? The fact that I have been adopted into a family by a very important person. I am God's son. I am God's daughter. I believe that our answer to this question is of utmost importance and will shape our entire discipleship to Jesus. It's related to how we practice our faith, how we relate to others, how we respond to different circumstances that come in our lives, how we perceive ourselves, and even how we perceive God. And to paraphrase Jethro, we are not able to bear the weight of forging our own significance. Further, not only will we wear ourselves out, but we'll wear others out, the people that come to us. Instead of loving them from a place of knowing who you are, you will be tempted to manipulate, control, and use others as a means of deriving your own significance. So with this new perspective on the problem, I think we can understand that Jethro's suggestion of delegation might do more for us than we initially thought. Not only will it help us not be crushed by our burdens and tasks as leaders, or empower new leaders, when we say no and share our responsibilities or bear burdens with others, we teach our souls a few things. For one, we teach ourselves that we are not as important as we think. We're not the only ones capable of doing the tasks at hand, nor are we the only ones called. We teach ourselves an attitude of what Tim Keller calls self-forgetfulness, that our significance is not as important as the real needs of others. We teach ourselves to trust in God instead of fighting for control. We teach ourselves to say no to things that are not as important as the things we should be saying yes to. We teach ourselves to be grateful for the responsibilities we already have. And finally, perhaps most importantly, we teach ourselves that we are not what we do, but rather who God says we are. Okay, I'm calling the worship team up already. Was it short? Great. Yes, worship team, you may come up. I've loved the Christological or Christ-centered preaching of the last 2 weeks. Pastor Bartley, if you remember, 2 weeks ago, he talked about how the cross was alluded to from the log being thrown into the ocean, right? There's the bitter waters of Meribah, but then the log comes in and the water becomes sweet, right? And last week, Elder Barry reminded us of how the cross was alluded to by the raising of the staff of God in the battle against the Amalekites, right? And I hope that today, perhaps you've been seeing some parallels between this text and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Jesus is much like Jethro was to Moses. Just as Jethro brought Moses into his family and established his identity in love, so God, through Jesus, adopts us into his loving family and gives us a new identity. You are now a beloved child of God. You are a son of God. You are a daughter of God. You belong to the living God. And once we grasp this, once I grasp this, we don't have to draw our significance from things that we do anymore. Instead, we're freed to gain our significance from who we are. So whereas Moses boasted saying that others come to me, we see Jesus saying, come to me as an invitation, a gentle and lowly invitation. Matthew 11 says this, come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus come to me as an invitation for you to lay your burdens on someone who can actually bear it. The only one who could bear it all alone. In fact, Jesus come to me will not wear you out. Instead, in inexpressible love, Jesus let the burdens of our sin wear him out on the cross so that we could receive true rest for our souls. Now, let's be honest, we may often be tempted, as Moses was, to draw our significance from the approval of others or things that we do, or even the sins that continue to creep up on us. But Jesus is trying to free us from those shaky identity markers with his invitation, come to me, come to me. And with his arms open wide on the cross, Jesus invites us to lay our burdens with him. Moses' come to me assumes we draw our significance from what we do, which is an unstable project. But Christ's come to me refreshes us and reminds us that it is only in coming to Jesus that we find our true significance. I'm closing. It's in view of the reality of this gospel that we can apply what we've learned in the text. We can delegate, we can say no, we can trust fully in God because and only because we enjoy our new identity in God's love. Our significance comes from what God has done for us, rescuing us from the slavery of sin and adopting us into his wonderful family. And then the anthem of our days is, I am God's son. I am God's daughter, because anything else will wear us out. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that we have been adopted into your loving family. And we know it's not because of anything that we've done. When we're honest with ourselves and we look deep into our hearts, we do see a bit of brokenness, if not a lot of brokenness, and we need your help. So Lord, we place our burdens on you, and we trust that your love for us is enough. It is more important than things that we do. It is more important than the successes that we've had in our lives. And by God's grace, it is more important than the sins that seem to continue to creep up on us. So Lord, we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done for us in Jesus on the cross. And I pray that each of us here would be able to come to you and approach you with confidence, knowing that we can receive true rest for our souls. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Join us every Sunday at 4 p.m. at 7755 10th Line West in Mississauga. Or visit us online at renewchurch.ca/connect.